On this episode of the Bronze Medalist podcast, we talk about Empyrean by Fallujah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bronze Medalist podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm OJ.
We're two professional broadcasters. We like metal and we like to talk about it. And today we're talking about a pretty new album. Came out last month.
Right.
It's called Empyrean by Fallujah. Fallujah?
How would you say it with an Iraqi accent?
I don't know, and I'm not going to try.
Oh, that's probably
Probably
good.
for the best.
Yeah.
I also don't really know what an Iraqi accent really sounds like. I would do something incredibly generic and therefore even more offensive. So,
by the way, you said earlier we were talking before this because we do that, and you were saying something,
warming up,
getting the old vocal cords warmed up, and you were talking about something that was Common Core. Talking about math, Common Core.
Common Core mathematics.
And when you said Common Core, I'm like, that's the most boring heavy metal on the planet.
This is Common Core.
Yeah.
Is that what? Is that what Slipknot is now? They're Common Core?
Yeah, sure. If you get reviewed in Loudwire, you're Common Core.
You're Common Core.
Yeah.
I feel like the term people actually have used for that is Normcore.
Normcore?
Like normie. But either that or Normcore refers to someone behaving either like Norm Macdonald or like Norm from Cheers.
Norm Peterson, right?
Norm Peterson, which they're two fairly different people.
Right. Both funny.
That's true. Both funny. Although it is kind of interesting because outside of his like television appearances with Norm Macdonald, almost everybody has absolutely nothing but good things to say about Norm Macdonald. Like,
even before he died.
He's so incredibly off-putting in any like television thing he's ever done because that was his style. That was part of what made him so funny is he's, so weird and disarming. But then I was watching a little mini documentary about him and people were talking about what he was like off camera. And apparently he was an extremely nice person, which is funny for a guy that got fired from SNL because he was being too harsh.
That's his style.
Again, yeah. That was his sort of style, but
he likes to use his powers for bad.
I don't know about bad. Some of the things were things that needed to be said.
Right. Oh,
just,
sure. Yeah.
Pissed off the people who perhaps gave money to NBC.
Yeah, and Lorne Michaels.
Well, yes, pissed off Lorne Michaels as well, but probably didn't make advertisers particularly happy
I'm sure.
either. Which is saying something when you're making the advertisers in a 10 to midnight slot angry.
If you're selling them a time slot during SNL and they're offended by what they see on SNL, there was a disconnect there at some point.
Do you understand what this show is? It's different from like nowadays where I don't know exactly what the deal is that got worked out where on cable and satellite TV and whatnot on like Sci-Fi Channel and whatnot, like past 8 p.m. you can say whatever the fuck you want, including fuck as many times as you please.
And there are some rules,
I suppose.
I don't think you can refer to fucking, but I think you can say fuck.
Well, it kind of depends because again, the FCC doesn't have any authority over stuff
cable.
Over stuff that's not over the airwaves.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Well, then how come? Well, I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, it's the FCC doesn't have any.
Who was regulating it before then?
Advertisers.
Oh. But then where is this rule written? I mean,
it wasn't written anywhere. It was just kind of generally an unwritten rule of like, we won't do this because our advertisers won't like it. But sort of, on certain channels that attract a certain fan base, advertisers probably go, they don't care. The people watching our ads are here for this content. Therefore, they don't care what they say in that content, and they're not going to associate that with our ads
right.
in a negative light because they're already coming to this channel for that content anyway.
You know, because I remember when that switchover happened, and I didn't understand then either. I didn't like who's saying. I mean, this is cable TV. Who's actually doing the regulations on this? I just never really had a conversation about it with anybody. But I do remember the South Park episode that week. Yeah, was the one where they said shit 240 times.
Yes, yeah, it was. Well, and I think that episode was in response to the FCC changing their regulations to allow that language to be used over the airwaves.
Yeah,
on your main
past 10 o'clock.
Your main broadcast channels. Yeah, instead of cable, because again, they've never had any authority over cable. That's always been advertisers.
That's always been the free market.
Yes, that's always been good old capitalism, keeping people from swearing too much. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I kind of turned into a pirate. I sort of turned into Mr. Krabs a little bit.
This well, yeah.
I really Clancy Browned it there.
Right. This is a window into Kale's brain right now.
I mean, what are pirates if not? Well.
The ultimate capitalists.
I don't know if I would really call them that, because generally the way that wealth was distributed on pirate ships is not strictly in line with what we would think of in a hyper-capitalist society.
The means of production are owned by the people.
Yeah. So
I guess when you think about it, yeah.
Yeah, usually there was a fair amount of equity.
So it was internally communist, but externally capitalist.
Yeah. An interesting idea, very aggressively. Speaking of pirates and stuff, the last couple of weeks, because on Tuesdays, me and some friends do like co-op game nights, and we've been playing Sea of Thieves, which I had never played before, which is a co-op sort of multiplayer, like open world pirate game where you get these NPC quests, and you have to go and find like these islands or like ships and whatnot, and there's like ghost ships and skeletons, and you can run into other players and do piracy upon those other players. Sure. If you want to. And it's one of those games where if you have never played it before and you encounter another group of players, the chances are that group of players has been playing since 2014. So I don't know precisely how it works, but there were four of us on like this galleon. Yeah. And we have 8 cannons and can take a whole bunch of hits and whatnot. And here's this little sloop with 2 cannons, one on either side, with two crew members, and they sunk us in about 10 seconds flat. They were their cannons shot like fucking miniguns. Like, it was insane the rate of fire that they pumped out of these cannons, and it's like, how are you doing this? How? I don't understand.
They've been upgrading them for 6 years.
Yeah, so it's like it's fun, but also fighting other players at this point, if you are new, is kind of a lost cause. It's kind of pointless.
It's too bad they don't do it like what the hell is that game? Fortnite.
How do they do it in Fortnite?
Well, they throw like, or is it Fortnite that they do that, where they throw like lower level players in with other low level players in the same lobby?
Well, I mean, that's just matchmaking. I mean, right. Although that particular style, I mean, most games have like ranked matchmaking and then general matchmaking. It used to be like with Halo 3, when Halo 3 came out, every single like multiplayer game that you played in was ranked, and you would get matched against players who were, at least according to the internal metrics, appropriate for your supposed skill level. Right. And then for some reason that went away, where now we have explicitly segregated multiplayer where you have to choose to play ranked matches, which then creates a sort of culture of, I feel like it's cultivated this culture of incredible toxicity for ranked gameplay. Really? Where people who play ranked regularly are extremely into it. And it's like the population of less skilled players is much smaller as time goes on.
Really?
For like, if a game has been out for a year and you just start playing it and like, I want to play in a ranked match, you might have trouble finding matches because there are less new players like you who are deciding to play ranked match.
Sure.
And then it's the gamble of going into a general match where you might be matched with just about anybody, including extremely sweaty players who aren't playing in ranked at the moment, even though they should be, that wipe the floor with everyone else constantly. And it's not fun to play against them. Like, I don't play a lot of multiplayer games, but
I don't either.
I've kind of noticed this tendency of like splitting it between like, oh, this is, you know, this is explicitly a ranked playlist for games, and this is a like a general population one. Like Halo Infinite does that, and it kind of bugs the shit out of me.
So Maximus was a really big Apex Legends fan, and the problem is I also bought Apex Legends for my apartment so that we could play together.
You played it because it's free to play, isn't it?
It is. It's a free game.
You said bought, which is what confused me.
Okay, I downloaded.
You downloaded it.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, I want to be able to play this with Max, and because father son bunding. Yes. We wanted a bund, and I. The unfortunate thing is that while I came to your house for D&D over the last year, he sat at my house playing Apex Legends. So now I'd like to go into a ranked room and get used to playing and get used to all the different characters and do that. But if I go into a ranked room, I'm going to be in a room with other 30th level people.
Yeah.
So I guess I really have to start over is what I have to do. Make a new account.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm more into when I want to play with other people these days. I'm more of a co-op person.
Yeah.
I really wanted to enjoy myself with
yourself.
I became
all of a sudden.
It was when I said myself, it was more Scottish, and then I said more words, and it started to sound Southern. But I really wanted to enjoy Halo Infinite multiplayer. But the incredibly bizarre development that's been going on ever since that game came out, like the really weird support is bizarre, and by support I mean lack of support.
Oh no, I mean
in the sense that
it was made by a very small company.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
But like it's so weird because my understanding of the hiring process, and it's not really a hiring process. It's more of the contracting process. For whatever reason, Microsoft, I presume, has forced this employment model onto 343 Industries, where the vast majority of people working for that developer at any given time are temporary contractors that are on contract for like 6 months to a year, and then they leave and take all of their experience with them. And the problem for that is Halo Infinite runs on a proprietary engine that 343 developed themselves that no one that doesn't work at the company or has not worked for them before as they were developing it has any idea how to use. So you're hiring new people that probably put in a solid month of contributive work before they leave and move on to something else, because those other 5 months are spent learning how to actually use the tools that they have. And it's so bizarre, and there's so many people like that just work on the game and then leave, so there's no continuity of experience for the vast majority of their staff. So any update takes forever. Like the game has been out for almost a year at this point. The multiplayer component of it has been out for almost a year at this point. It'll be a year about this time next month.
Wow.
And they have released like 2 new maps.
Really?
They haven't released any new weapons. They've done a small, like a relatively decent amount of armor sets that are difficult to get because you have to grind through battle passes to get them, because they decided to go free to play because Fortnite made $1 billion, so now everybody's got to try to go free to play, and it's fucking cancer for the entire games industry
and for parents.
Yes,
yeah,
but like it's and now there was a debacle a couple months ago with Halo Infinite where, or maybe it was last month, I can't remember. There was probably another one a couple months ago too, but in any case, this was them announcing that we have decided to abandon split screen, the development of split screen co-op.
Why?
Because we just don't have the time or the staff to develop it.
Why?
Because of well, here's the thing, for no good reason.
Right.
Because somebody said we can't do that anymore, even though hours after they made that announcement, someone glitched their way into playing split screen campaign, which, by the way, just regular online co-op for the campaign has not been released yet.
Jeez.
And like that, the campaign's been out for 8 months at this point. But hours after they announced that they were abandoning it, that they didn't have the ability to continue working on it, people glitched into playing it, and it seems like it works perfectly fine. It seems like it is functioning absolutely perfectly fine, and there's seemingly nothing wrong with it. And it's really funny because when Halo 5 came out, or before Halo 5 came out, one of the officials at 343, who I think just recently quit, said emphatically, "We understand that local split screen co-op is a core element of the Halo franchise, and we will never ship a game without it." And then
immediately,
the next game after that, like the company is a fucking mess, and it sucks because I wanted to like them so much. Like Halo 4 came out. A lot of people don't like Halo 4. I like Halo 4. I like Halo 4's campaign. I enjoy that they tried to incorporate a whole bunch of stuff from like the background books that never got talked about in the games because Bungie, who were the original developers for Halo, didn't give a shit about any of the books.
Sure.
Because reading's for nerds. But that like 343 was like, we're going to introduce a whole bunch of this stuff. And they commissioned this a writer called Greg Bear to write this trilogy of books about the Forerunners, which is like Dune level science fiction. It's like extremely like complex science is magic stuff. It's insane. And a lot of really, really interesting. There's like cosmic horror and all this stuff that's always been there, but just like in the background of the games and really delving into that element. And Halo 4 brings that into the games. And I thought that was really neat. And then in Halo 5, they were like, everybody hated Halo 4. So here's a really generic storyline about how the AI that used to be your friend is now evil. Even though she died at the end of 4. And that was a really big deal that she died at the end of 4, but actually she didn't die. And now she's evil. Do you like it? And everybody said no. So then they pulled a Rise of Skywalker and completely ignored Halo 5 when Halo Infinite came out and pretended like it never happened.
They retconned it.
Instead of developing the few things that were interesting about Halo 5 and continuing that forward, they basically pretended like it didn't happen and swept it all under the rug. And I like Halo Infinite's campaign for what it is, but there's so fucking many missed opportunities.
Yeah.
Halo is a thing I feel passionately about. You know what else I feel passionately about?
Fallujah.
This album.
Yeah.
So Fallujah is an American technical death metal band with elements of lots of atmospheric music, certainly extremely heavy progressive metal element.
Yeah, there's some metalcore in there.
They are, I think, a perfect marriage between technical death metal, progressive death metal, and I guess sort of spacey kind of atmospheric post-rock, if you want to call it that, in the sense that, like, when I think of technical death metal, I think of something that is impressive to listen to for 3 minutes. And then after that, you go, all right, I'm sick of this because it is so clinical and soulless.
Right.
That I just, it's drum machine and extremely fast, guitars. And it's like, this is impressive that someone wrote this and recorded it, but there's no soul here.
Like the Genterator.
Yeah, like it's that's how a decent amount of sort of technical death metal and the heavier, faster side of gent. I don't know if like there was a good like 5 to 10 years there where gent really kind of stood on its own as like a genre. I don't think it does anymore. I think that's kind of gone away.
When somebody told me, I really like gent music, whatever that period of time was.
Yeah.
I assumed it was some sort of really polite music.
It's for gent.
It's for gent. Yes.
No, it's bands that heard Meshuggah and went, yes, we will do that and only that.
What sound are you going to make?
Gent. But like this, I would describe this band's sound, at least on this album. They've had sort of some different sounds. Their earlier stuff is a bit more deathcore-esque, but they have always certainly incorporated an extremely prominent sort of progressive element to their music. Lots of polyrhythms and complex riffing and whatnot.
But they've also got, and I couldn't figure it out, who their backing vocalist is. This woman who sings.
Yeah, who pops up? I'm not sure.
Oh, pops up a lot.
I didn't really read, into any reviews or anything like that past looking for scores to get an aggregate score.
Right.
But I know that they worked with a vocalist called Tori Letzler on their 2016 album. I don't know if this is her or not.
Because they do harmonies. I mean,
yeah, there's and she. I think some of those is actually the main vocalist who I think just has a relatively high pitched voice when they're doing clean singing.
Right.
But because there's a lot of multi-tracked vocals on here doing, high and low screams together and that sort of thing. But it's interesting to me with this band and in this sound in the sense that I was going to describe their sound as being like an interesting fusion between Meshuggah and like a much more cleaned up Blood Incantation.
Okay.
Like Blood Incantation does well in the sense that like if you think about like the songwriting for Blood Incantation, it is very spacey and very progressive.
Sure.
It's just that their guitar tone and overall just vibe is much grimier and much more, classic death metal. But if you took that same songwriting and that same like all of the sort of progressive and their whole vibe is space metal, even though the name of the band doesn't really sell like, oh, what do these guys sing about? Do they aliens and outer space and whatnot is what all of their work is about. Even though with a name like Blood Incantation, you'd assume it was about, satanic stuff. But no, it's all of their work is about, outer space and aliens and stuff. And that sort of fits the vibe of Fallujah. They've always been extremely good at, by the way, Fallujah has always been extremely good at selecting just gorgeous album art. Oh my God.
This does have a beautiful cover.
Their 2016 album Dreamless also has beautiful album art. And then the album before that, I can't remember the name of it, but it's almost always like some sort of large, like sort of looming, beautiful, angelic being, but angelic in sort of a like biblically accurate angel sort of way, where it's kind of like it's inhuman and like slightly inhuman looking. And
the angels in the Bible are not beautiful.
Yeah, well,
they're terrifying.
I think I was doing like D&D research or something like that about angels in the real world. Angels in the real world. Yeah. At least, the lore of angels throughout the, Abrahamic religions and whatnot. And there is sort of a there is like a class of angels that are the crazy, multiple concentric rings covered in eyes and 15 pairs of wings and whatnot that are horrifying to look at. But then you've got like figures like Gabriel who pop up repeatedly, both, in Christianity, in Judaism, and in Islam. And they are always described as being humanoid. So there's obviously some sort of difference, or angels can like change the way that they look, or something like that.
I don't know why. Because I'm not controlling my brain. There's nobody in charge of my brain. It does not happen.
The car is on fire.
There's a driver at the wheel.
Driver at the wheel.
Yeah, when you said the Archangel Gabriel, I imagine Gabriel Iglesias.
Oh. Did I say Gabriel? I think I meant, Okay, I got Gabriel and Michael confused for a second. Gabriel's the one that's basically Christianity's Hermes.
Sure.
Is the way that I always think of Gabriel for some reason. Because he's the messenger. He's the one who always says, hey, God says this. Later.
Have you ever seen, I think in most movies where they have Hermes in, like when they're doing something on Greek mythology, they bring Hermes in. For some reason, he's just the most flamboyant. I've got a message. And he's just.
I feel like that should be Dionysus. Except Dionysus is flamboyant, but also drunk.
Yeah, right.
But I need to finish Hades. I never finished Hades.
The game. Sure.
I never finished it. That was a fantastic game, but I started doing other things. But anyhow, speaking of other things, let's get back to the album. But always really beautiful album art. And kind of back to the way that they handle songwriting. Something that is interesting to me is that what is technically the lead for their guitars is quieter than the rhythm.
It's more of a texture than a lead.
Yeah, because and that's something that is, if you think about like sort of gent bands, or the prototype for gent being, of course, Meshuggah, and just the extreme progressive metal bands that pop up in the late 90s. I guess Meshuggah's been around for a lot longer than that, but that's
the 80s.
That's when their style sort of took off. Those bands don't really have lead guitars.
Sure.
Like you will not hear a guitar solo, generally speaking, in at least I'm not a really big Meshuggah fan, so I can't say that they've never had a guitar solo. I'm certain they have, but any Meshuggah song I've ever heard hardly has any melody in it whatsoever.
Right.
What this has that I love is you have that very heavy stop and start, sort of staccato of rhythm section with all sorts of, weird little touches here and there. And then always underneath it is this really beautiful like melody that carries forth on the lead. That's underneath it as a texture, like you said. And it's something that is really, it seems to be really unique to them, and something that also makes their music much less onerous to listen to. I think that's the right use of that.
Yeah, I didn't find this onerous at all.
Yeah. And that's how I felt about like a lot of gent that I've tried to listen to. I get sick of it.
Right.
It feels, again, it's that sort of clinical, too clean, too precise feeling where every song kind of ends up sounding the same. And it's just a whole bunch of, oh, you're going to palm mute for the next 5 minutes. Okay. Whereas this has so much more going for it. What did you enjoy about this? Because you it's not super often that you text me like a couple days before we do the episode to say, holy shit, this is great.
Yeah.
And you did that the other day. So what are your thoughts about this?
For me, there are elements of power metal in there. I mean,
which is interesting to me.
Yeah, because they do these, sort of, these chord progressions that are, but it's all in kind of a minor key.
Yeah.
It just has that, shouting from a mountaintop kind of feel to it sometimes.
Sure.
And I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And plus it also had the death metal element, and it also had very well incorporated keyboards, and it had a great backing vocalist, and it had some really great standout songs.
Yeah. No, they're a very interesting band, and their album that came out in 2016, they sort of connected to a term that hasn't really taken off. Because I don't know if there's any bands that really would describe themselves with this term, but they have used the term atmospheric death metal as like a description of if they were to have a subgenre, that is what they would call themselves.
And I love both of those things. I love to listen to atmospheric music. I love death metal. Holy shit. Peanut butter? Chocolate?
These two things together, perhaps. But yeah, I think it is definitely an appropriate descriptor. But part of terms like that is also being able to say, okay, so what other bands sound like that? And then you have to go, well, there kind of aren't any other ones.
Sure.
That at least that spring to my mind and that are, as popular and have, any amount of work that you can listen to. Not that Fallujah is like a big band or anything, but they've been around for a while at this point. I don't know why I put so much emphasis on the H there,
right.
But they've been around for a decent amount of time. I think since 2008. Let me pull up their page here in just a second. They have been around since 2007. They're from San Francisco, by the way.
Gotcha. Always a great metal scene in San Francisco.
Yes, the Bay Area. Yeah. And they, they've in their time they've toured with a bunch of pretty big bands. They've toured with Black Dahlia Murder, Thy Art Is Murder,
Benny Goodman,
The Contortionist, Between the Buried and Me, Carnifex, everyone's favorite death metal band, Dying Fetus. Which there was an album that they put out a couple years ago that I actually really liked. There was a period where I was like trying to get into some classic death metal bands, and they were one of the ones that was suggested, like, you should get into these guys. And I was like, nah, I just did like a lot of their stuff I didn't like. But there was one that came out in like 2017 that I thought was actually really good. But yeah, they've been around since 2007. Their lineup has changed a number of times.
Right. The rhythm guitar player and drummer are the only original members.
And even then, the drummer actually isn't technically an original member, but he joined in the year that the band was founded. They started out with a guy called Tommy Logan. And then he left and was replaced by a guy named Andrew Baird, who's been with them ever since. But Tommy Logan was seemingly with the band for like no longer than 6 months.
Right. He was the Pete Best of.
Yes, he was the Pete Best of Fallujah.
Right.
But yeah, or I guess he's described as the lead guitarist is Scott Carstairs.
Right.
Which I think in this band, the lead guitarist is technically the rhythm guitarist.
Just how they work that.
Yeah. And probably doing most of the songwriting as well, because they do have an extremely consistent style. It's not one of those things where like, oh, the style has changed so much because members have come and gone. Like, if you think about like Architects, for example,
sure.
Their style before their lead guitarist passed away and their style after are quite different because their previously guitarist did almost all of their songwriting.
Right. The twin brother of the drummer.
Yeah. And I feel like Fallujah has had a very consistent sort of development of their songwriting style.
Why haven't we talked about the latest Architects album?
I think because we both listened to a couple songs and went, No, not really all that interested. I was pretty lukewarm on the album previous to that too. So
that stinks because there was such a great band.
Yeah. I mean, they still are a good band, just not for us.
Yeah,
I think.
What was it that I told you? I think I said
they spent a lot of money to sound like Linkin Park.
Right.
Which also really depends on what era of Linkin Park you're talking about too, because Linkin Park changed styles 8 billion times. But Fallujah. Does this album slap?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
This album slaps like hell. It slaps a lot. Was looking up albums as we were warming up and talking because I forget to do any research ahead of time these days.
Right.
5 reviews came out to 82 out of 100, which I think is appropriate for an album like this. This is a good album. Very competently recorded. It sounds great. This is a very well produced album. I think that the album between Dreamless and this one, I can't remember the name of it. It came out in 2018 or 19. I've hardly listened to that. They had a vocalist. They've had over the last 3 albums have had 3 different vocalists.
Oh, wow.
Their original vocalist left after Dreamless.
2014?
No, that would have been 2016.
Right.
And that was Alex Hoffman. And I really liked Alex Hoffman's singing.
Mm-hmm.
And the vocalist that they got to replace, I wasn't particularly fond of their vocal style. It did not seem to mesh well with their songwriting and their playing, because their vocals felt like they would have been much more at home in like a hardcore punk band.
Sure.
And just did not seem to fit with what I expect from an atmospheric death metal band. Like they weren't really capable of doing any like low death growls or anything like that. I didn't hear anything that I felt like went with this style of music. Not that they were a bad vocalist, but they just didn't seem to be a very good fit.
Sure.
This latest vocalist, though, has a fair bit of range. They can do some clean vocals. They can do sort of that semi-melodic scream. I think their high vocal is sort of where they kind of sit most comfortably. Their death growl, though, kind of reminds me of a ever so slightly higher pitched Corpse Grinder.
Sure.
Is kind of how their death growl tends to sound. It's more of a like I had an adjective in my head and then I sort of lost it. The way that George Fisher tends to do his growls is it's a gritty shout. Is kind of how I would describe most of Corpse Grinder's vocals. It sounds like there is a lot of air coming out at once, but it is got lots of grit in it, and that's not the way everyone does death growls and that sort of thing. The album we're talking about next week has a vocalist where when you listen to them, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of air coming out. It's just extremely intense gurgles and grunts that I do not understand how they make those.
This
noises.
guy is an athlete.
Yes. Good God. What's your favorite song on this album?
It's either track 2 or track 3, Radiant Ascension or Embrace Oblivion. I love those two, but I also love the last cut, Artifacts.
Artifacts is quite good.
Yeah.
I am going to say Into the Eventide is my favorite track. Okay. That is like the first song that you hear that to us unnamed female backing vocalist, and she pops up and is like, ooh.
Yeah.
And I really, really like that touch. And it's a great song. Probably one of the more melodic cuts on the album. Which one is the instrumental track? Is that Celestial Resonance or the
second to last track?
Yeah, that's the instrumental cut. That one's really good. I do like Mindless Omnipotent Master because it brings to mind what the hell is the Lovecraft? Is it Nyarlathotep? Is the blind idiot god? Where it's like this giant mouth in space that is extremely powerful, but is also asleep and can't it's all powerful, but also dumb is its whole thing. But if it woke up, it could destroy the universe or something.
Sure.
Which I always thought is kind of a funny concept for an elder god, where like people refer to it as the blind idiot. It's like, that's kind of funny in a universe where you've got all these other insane, crazy, terrifying things. Right. There's also this giant blob of flesh that is technically the most powerful being in the setting, but doesn't do anything. It's kind of funny to me. What medal are you bestowing upon this? Like Maz Kanata to Chewbacca.
I give this a gold without a question.
It's a gold. This is good shit. If you like progressive metal, if you like death metal, this is going to be your jam. This is really enjoyable. I think it hits some of the same. It scratches some of the same itches. It quenches some of the same thirsts, perhaps, as like Opeth back in the day may have.
Yeah.
Opeth, is a bit is less spacey and more flowery. More of a sort of Victorian vibe is kind of what I associate with Opeth.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know exactly why that's the adjective that comes to mind.
There are more acoustic guitars in
acoustic guitars and sort of a kind of a gothic vibe. Whereas this is, definitely very cosmic. But similar sort of vibes of like heavy progressive music that doesn't get too far up its own ass about being the most complex and most technical thing you've ever heard, and just sort of lets the songwriting breathe. Because that's when I get sick of listening to progressive metal and technical death metal is like, all right, I get it. You guys can play really fast and really complicated, but can you do something interesting now? And that never happens listening to this album.
You've probably... I may have to bring this at some point.
Okay.
Band called Cryptic Slaughter.
I feel like I've heard of them, but I probably haven't listened to them.
They're one of the forerunners. They sort of... The forerunners of grindcore.
Okay.
But they weren't grindcore. Definitely not.
Well, we'll have to talk about them at some point.
Right.
But next week, you have agreed to do.
I have.
The
Lorna
new,
Doone. Yeah.
Lorna Doone. The new Lorna Shore album, Pain Remains, is going to be next week.
Because it wasn't out yet today.
Yes. So otherwise, I would have chosen.
Right. I'm totally down with Laura Croft next week. That'll be.
Damn it.
That's what we'll listen to.
But yeah, Pain Remains by Lorna Shore. I'm very, very excited about this album.
Yeah.
Like as far as metal releases go, it's probably the most excited I've been for like a new metal album since not a new metal album, a new metal album.
This is going to be the best album since Limp Bizkit's
Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Water.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since we've made a joke about that album.
Yeah.
No, it's probably like the most excited I've been for like a new metal release since probably like Death Atlas by Cattle Decapitation.
Sure.
Because there's been a lot of other like metal releases where I'm like, I'll probably like that, but I haven't been super duper hyped for it. Like, like the Shadow of Intent album that came out last year, or the Fit for an Autopsy and that sort of thing. Like, cat wants on my lap. Like, I was excited for those, but not like super hyped for them because I was like, I'm probably going to like it, but they've released so many singles from this album, and then I've gone, holy fuck, after every one, that it's probably the most excited I've been for a metal album in a while.
You know, when they're new vocalist, everybody's like, that's not humanly possible. And then he has to prove that he can actually do the things that he does on the album. You know, this is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, he's like a master of every style of screamed vocals you can possibly think of.
And a soothing high falsetto.
I'm sure he can.
Yeah.
I'm sure he can. He's extremely, extremely talented. Very excited to talk about that next week. But until we do get to that, why don't you go ahead and go to your browser and type in Facebook or Twitter and go ahead and search for the Bronze Metals Podcast on there and give us a follow on either of those platforms. And maybe that's how you get your updates when new episodes come out. Otherwise, just subscribe to our feed on whatever you're using to listen to us currently. And that's how you get your new episodes, whether you're listening to us on your Apple Podcast app or Libsyn's podcast source, or I don't know, maybe there's some secret thing that I don't know about.
Or
that would be weird, wouldn't it?
If perhaps you're looking down at Facebook, you're looking on your phone and you're thinking, man, I'd like to listen to that podcast. You can search for your phone and find out where that podcast app is.
He's referencing
something he did seconds before we began this.
Right before we started recording, I needed to look at a thing and I was like, where's my phone? and it was in my hand.
And he'd been staring at it for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, because I needed a calculator. I needed a calculator, and normally I go from the computer to the calculator on my phone, and my brain could not compute how to go from my phone to the calculator on the computer.
Right.
And it broke my brain. So that,
and it was, I had a cramp. I got a cramp in my midsection.
He thought it was fucking hilarious. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
All right. So thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Bronze Medalist Podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm OJ.
Congratulations.